Welcome back to the Blood Bear channel. Today, I thought I was going to talk about How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Cowell. Now, I mainly wanted to talk about about the movies and why the movies are such horrible adaptations of the book. Now, I do want to preface this with saying I don't think the movies are bad. In fact, they're some of my favorite animated films. But they're just nothing like the books. So I've only read the first two books so far in the series. Kind of just before I start reading the third book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, which I've done reviews for those first two books. So now I will say I like the movies. This usually isn't how it goes. With this stuff, normally the books are better than the movies. But so far I've enjoyed the movies more so than the books. But yeah. Now, pretty much just about everything in the books is different to the movies. In the movies, you have, some of the characters are kind of the same. Like Snotlout is pretty much the same. Hiccup is fairly the same, and Stoic is also pretty much the same. Like Hiccup is still a scrawny, the scrawny Viking, right? That wants to fit into the Viking village tribe. And then Stoic is still disappointed that his kid's such a scrawny weakling. And then Snotlout is still a big old jerk to Hiccup because Hiccup is a scrawny weakling. Although in the books, I'm not sure if this was in the movies. I'm kind of shooting from the hip here. But I don't know if Snotlout is like Hiccup's cousin, and like if Hiccup were to die, Snotlout would technically be second in line as chief in the movies, because in the books that's the case. Snotlout's dad is Stoic's little brother, and if Hiccup dies, then technically Snotlout's dad would be the next heir, and then Snotlout. So yeah, basically Snotlout kind of wants Hiccup to screw up really bad to where he can kind of just, it's either where Snotlout can kind of just secretly kill Hiccup off, or Hiccup just messes up so bad he dies, so that Snotlout will be chief one day. Now, the rest of the cast of characters are kind of different. Fish Legs, for instance, is much smaller and scrawnier, much like Hiccup is, than his more thick-set body in the movies. But they also have a much closer friendship than they do in the movies. Like, him and Hiccup are quite friendly, whereas in the movie, he's kind of just off on his own until eventually they become friends. In later movies, they're closer. And then you have the dragons. The dragons are very different, especially size-wise. They're smaller than humans. Most of them are anyways. Like, the monstrous nightmares, I think, are about the size of, up to a torso on a human or something. I'm not entirely sure what their sizes are, but we know Toothless is very small. But, well, we know that they're small. Actually, they're not the size of up to that, because we know that these dragons fit on the Vikings' shoulders. So we know that much. So yeah, they're much smaller in the books than they are in the films. They can't be ridden on. And Toothless is very small. Toothless, he is not a rare Night Fury in the books like he is in the movies. He is he's not only a common dragon, but a very small common dragon. So Hiccup is basically a laughingstock out of his generation, because he got that dragon. Another thing that's different is that there isn't really an animosity between the dragons and the Vikings. Capturing and training dragons is seen more as a rite of passage in the books, whereas in the movies they're obviously dragons are ransacking the village and whatnot. So yeah. Also, there are characters that just don't appear in the books at all. In the second book, we saw Tough Nut Jr., but in the first book, it was just Tough Nut was just an elder. So I was like, okay, so Tough Nut isn't even in this book. But later in the second book, we saw a brief glimpse of Tough Nut Jr. So, but I so far have not seen any signs of Rough Nut, so she doesn't exist, and I've seen no signs of Astrid at all. So I'm pretty sure that Astrid was a character made specifically for the movies and not in the books. Now, story-wise, for the the final boss is also kind of different. It's still a massive dragon, right? Like in the movie, they go up against that massive dragon, I think it's called the Red Death. But in the books, there are two massive dragons on either side of the island of Berk that washed up, that kind of came onto the beaches. One is a massive dragon, which in the books they're called C. Draconis Giganticus Maximus. So there's a green one that washes up on one beach, and then there's a purple one that washes up on another beach. And basically, Hiccup comes up with a plan. It's like, hey, let's get these guys to not like each other by spreading rumors, and then have them meet up and clash. And that's exactly what happens. The purple dragon, so the Green Death chases after Hiccup and tries to kill Hiccup, and then the purple dragon immediately, so whenever they get to the middle, the dragons clash, the two giant dragons clash, and struggle for a long time. But then, eventually, the Purple Death loses and is dead, and the Green Death is left mortally wounded and seeking revenge. So one thing, I guess, that I should preface with this is that in the books, the dragons are kind of a lot more intelligent, because, they can talk. They have their own language called Dragonese in the books, and they can actually talk. And Hiccup is the only one that knows Dragonese, because Stoic outlawed learning that language, and because he sees it as being kind of wimpy, I think, if I remember correctly. So yeah. So Hiccup's the only one that knows it, and then these two massive dragons show up, so Hiccup has to go and talk to them. Well, I think he only talks to the Green Death in the first book. So, yeah. And then basically Hiccup gets eaten by the Green Death, and he shoves his Viking helmet with the horns into its. It's got these like flame, they're kind of like the nostrils on somebody's nose, but like in the throat, which releases a gas that can be ignited. And so Hiccup shoves his Viking helmet, which perfectly fits and seals off that gas to be released. And then Toothless flies into the dragon's nose, massive nose, and starts tickling it until it eventually sneezes and Hiccup is flung out of the dragon. And then it explodes because its gas just kept building and building, and then it just goes kablooey. So yeah. And then he is hailed a hero because he killed a giant freaking dragon. Right? Also, Hiccup never loses a leg like he does in the movies. So yeah, that never happens as far as I'm aware. Like I said, I've only read to like the first 2 books, but as far as I'm aware, he hasn't lost a leg yet. So yeah, and I mean that's pretty much the plot for that's the most like similar plot that I've seen so far. That's similar to the movie. Is them fighting a giant dragon. So in the second one, I don't think that was ever adapted into the movies. Basically, I mean, if you've seen the shows, you would know who this is. Alvin, that one mainly focuses on the outcasts and Alvin the Treacherous, which he shows up in the shows like Defenders of Berk and Race to the Edge, I think. And again, he's much different. Alvin is actually much different in the books than he is in the movies or the shows, because Alvin is more portrayed as another like strong-headed Viking, much like stoic in that sense. And in fact, in the shows, they were actually friends until Alvin did something to get him sent off the island of Berk. Right. And while Alvin in the book is actually, I would say he's much more similar to Hiccup, because he's actually a much scrawnier person, and he's much more cunning in the books than in, well, he's kind of cunning in the show, because he's constantly coming up with plans to try to take down Berk or kidnap Hiccup so that he can ride dragons. But in the book, in the second book, he kind of uses the greed of the Vikings, like the more adult Vikings, kind of against them. So he kind of leads them to this deadly island called Scullion Island. And Scullions are another type of dragon. They're like the size of like lions, and they don't have eyes or ears. All they have is these giant mouths. And you have these mouths with really sharp teeth, like dragons do. And they have like massive noses, because their main way to hunt is through smell. So Alvin gets them onto that island, and then he's like, oh, well, I can't step onto that island because I don't have a way with dragons like you people on Berk do. And so Alvin stays on the ship while everybody else goes onto the island to search for the treasure. And then eventually Snotlout finds the treasure, opens it, and then it's a a stink bomb basically inside the chest. So that wakes up all the scullions on the island, and then they start attacking the Vikings. And Hiccup gets like a big gash on his chest. Stoic is being a badass and killing everybody, killing all the scullions, because he's like whirling an axe above his head while he stabs people. Not people. He stabs the scullions. But also, they wanted to go to this island because it was Grimbeard the Ghastly's like treasure, where he hid the treasure, and the like this legendary blade called the Storm Blade, right? Which is like super sharp. So it's not loud, and they also said that whoever finds it will be like the true heir to the hooligan tribe. So Snotlout found it, right? And Stoic took the Storm Blade from Snotlout. So that's what happened. And then all Hiccup found was a giant, like, seashell. So good job, Hiccup. So yeah, eventually they are able to safely get off the island, but then before they can return to Berk, are betrayed by Alvin as they're taken over by an outcast fleet. And all the dragons that the Vikings owned have already fled. So, like, they already fled to Berk, except for Toothless. Because Toothless was like, it's kind of a long flight. I'm going to just chillax here. And so he does, and then he gets trapped under a barrel. And then eventually he gets freed from said barrel, which causes a distraction. And then all hell breaks loose. The Vikings are fighting and killing and capturing. And then the boat gets caught on fire. And then everybody jumps overboard. They have to steal the outcast's boat. But Fishlegs is actually in a blind, like, rage. And Hiccup is trying to get him to calm down and jump off the ship because it's on fire, until the mast falls on Hiccup, Fishlegs, and Alvin, and then the boat sinks. So they sink to the bottom of the ocean, and so it's Hiccup, Toothless, and Alvin. Hiccup, Toothless, Alvin, and Fishlegs are all on the bottom of the ocean in an air pocket in the ship, which is very rapidly depleting. So Hiccup sends out Toothless, because dragons are able to survive underwater because they have gills as well. And then, like, only their noses are, like, above the water at that point, and, like, they're touching the top of, like, the ceiling of the boat, and they're, like, basically out of air when Toothless comes back and leads them to an underwater cavern, but, like, then it opens up into, again, another, like, where there's air. So Toothless leads them to that, and then they find that's actually where Grimbeard the Ghastly left his treasure, his actual treasure, and that is where that is what the true heir is supposed to have found. So then Alvin obviously pulls out a sword and threatens to kill Hiccup if he doesn't open the door, which is probably booby-trapped. And so Hiccup doesn't. Hiccup's like, well, okay, so if I don't open this door, you'll kill me. And then if I open this door, you're going to kill me anyways. And then, so he's just like, I guess I'll just open the door so I don't get killed right now. And so, yeah, they enter that. It's a chamber filled with gold and stuff. And a giant dragon underneath the gold, which is like, it's kind of like a dragon octopus mix, because it has like the horns and like the teeth and like the face of a dragon, and with like a long neck and stuff, and then like big body with like massive tentacles all around. And then it's like a white, transparent kind of color. So then eventually Alvin gets eaten by said dragon, and Hiccup tricks the dragon to stabbing itself with its own poison, and then that's how he kills that dragon. And then him and Fish Legs, well, he decides not to tell anybody about this treasure that they found, because earlier in the book, Stoic got like super what's the word? Like blinded with greed, I guess. Like to where he kind of was like, it seemed like he was kind of valuing the treasure more than he had value for Hiccup, until Hiccup was actually in danger, and then he dropped the chest and went to go save his son. So Hiccup was like, yeah, maybe we should just not have this treasure. And then Hiccup's like, okay, or not Hiccup, Fish Legs is like, okay, but then nobody's gonna know that you're the true heir. And so then Hiccup's like, yeah, yes, but it's worse than what would happen if everybody knew about it. So yeah, then they go up to the surface by swimming, because they swim up with Toothless, and Toothless is able to give them air so that they could breathe. And then they wash ashore onto Burke, where Stoic is grieving because his son is dead, in quotation marks. And yeah, and then they're alive, and then big old happy ending. Stoic hugs Hiccup, and boom, book ends. But yeah, I don't think that was in any of the movies or in any of the shows. So I will say that I do like the movies more. I like the books. The books are good, but I like the movies more. I think the dragon designs are much cooler, and the fact that they're riding the dragons is also much cooler. And I think the movies have kind of better character development and just characters in general. Like with the relationship between Hiccup and Astrid, and then and then Hiccup becoming the leader, which is going to happen in the books. The books, there's 12 books in the series, so it's going to probably be a lot longer before, we see him actually coming into his leadership role. Like I said, I've only read the first two, so, but needless to say, the movies are horrible adaptations of the books. They're god-awful adaptations. They're like nothing like the books at all, but they are still great movies. Now, the only reason I say that is probably because I didn't read the books first. If I read the books first, I might have a more a different reaction to the films, because I would be like, well, this is nothing like the actual story. This is completely different. They butchered the story that I like. But since I've watched the movies first, I'm not entitled to that opinion. So and I think that's a lot of the things that happen with adaptations in general, is if people have seen the previous, like the original of what it's being adapted from, they're much harsher and they want the source material to be brought to life. Whereas if you haven't seen it, then you're able to recognize a good movie as a good movie and a bad movie as a bad movie. Like most modern live action adaptations are just not good and don't need to exist. I don't even know why they made the live action How to Train Your Dragon movie. It's completely unnecessary, and all it did was make the fans of the series not like like dislike the live action even more, and like the direction that they have been going, because they did those like Rescue Rider shows in like the Nine Realms, which nobody liked, and there was because like they completely made the characters different. Like I think Snotlout looked like Snotlout and Hiccup looked like Hiccup, but that was pretty much it. Astrid didn't look like she did in the movies, and I think that would have been fine because the actress that they got did look kind of like Astrid. All they needed to do was give her like blue eye contacts and a blonde wig, and she would have been fine. But then the real damage is probably with the twins, because they became redheads, and then Roughnut became overweight, which I don't understand why they basically made it so the twins don't look like twins. Anyways, whatever. I'm probably never gonna watch that movie, and I'll just stick to the good animated trilogy, the good movies. But yeah, so you can be blinded by it pretty much. I mean, I'm sure it's still a good movie, the live action remake, because they didn't change much. From what I understand, they didn't change much of the actual like story of like from the animated movie. So I'm sure the live action is fine, but I think the animated one is probably gonna be better and stay better for a long while. But needless to say, yes, knowing the original source material can cloud one's judgment on an adaptation, because it can be a horrible adaptation but still be a great movie, and that's what the animated How to Train Your Dragon movies prove, because they are horrible adaptations of the book, but they are still fantastic movies. Some of my favorite, I would say it's probably my favorite like animated movie. I love those movies so much. Yeah, so that's it. Please do like and subscribe. It will help me out greatly, and I greatly appreciate it if you do. But yeah, that's it. So see you next time, I guess. Bye.